In America, we have women's rights groups of every variety. Um, how does the plight of a woman differ in America to the plight of a woman in, let's say, Saudi Arabia?
It's completely different. In Saudi Arabia or in many Arab countries, women are seen as property of men. They're seen as second class citizens. Saudi Arabia, it was just recently that a woman could drive in the car by herself or travel without either her husband or her brother or her father. So when we think of women's rights in the United States, it's a very different discussion for women in many places in the Middle East where anything can happen to you and it won't matter simply because you're a woman. Violence, abuse, it can be you're the property of the man that's in charge of you, whether that's your husband, your boss, the government. And women, it's also taboo for women to speak out on issues, to share your opinion. Women don't speak up in a lot of these countries. So even the voice of a woman here in the United States has more freedom than the voice of women in many of these countries.
So we hear these stories, you know, and we hear about these countries. Uh, but in the case of Saudi Arabia, they would be considered our friend in the Middle East. They would be considered our ally. We have full and active diplomatic relations with this country. Um, what role do our politicians play in doing something about this?
A huge role. At the end of the day, it really is about money and power, right? So we should, as Americans, we should be putting pressure on our politicians, on our government to sanction Saudi Arabia, to sanction Turkey, to sanction China for their human rights abuses. I mean, it is a horrific tragedy and injustice that we are continuing to do business with and make deals with to the number of billions of dollars while countries are knowingly committing human rights abuses against their citizens.
What do Christians in these other countries think about Christians in the West or in America?
I think to a degree, they wish they had the freedom that we had. They wish that they could go to church and not worry if it means that they will go to jail. They wish that they wouldn't have to worship in private. But at the same time, I think that they think that maybe the American church has gotten comfortable. There's an urgency that happens when you're persecuted. There's a fire that's lit within you. You when you make the decision to follow Christ in a country that's persecuted, you're making the decision to die for Jesus, whether that's tomorrow, whether that's 10 years down the line, or whether perhaps it will never happen, but you're accepting the risk that at some point or another, I might have to die for my faith. Am I willing to make that stand? And I think the American church can learn from that. We can learn from the boldness of the faith of Christians in the Middle East, of the underground church in China, the underground church in Iran. And we can learn from their bold witness, their urgency, their fire that they have for Jesus.
Do you think they resent us in our comfort, our religious comfort?
No, I think they depend on us. They need their brothers and sisters in the US to be their voice, to be their advocate. Whenever we do work with a persecuted church, we bring them food, clothing. A lot of times we'll do medical missions. And despite all of that support that we bring, when we ask them what is the greatest need, they will almost always say, please continue to pray for us. And they will also say, thank you for knowing and caring about our suffering. So the greatest need from the mouth of the persecuted church is that their brothers and sisters in the US are praying for them and standing with them. So they depend on us for that solidarity.